All right, guys. So right here, we're going to talk about hiring an insurance agent. Most of the time, most people don't really. It's really easy to find a policy, so it's nothing really to stress about. In this case, though, it is important though to have the contact information of someone. So, for instance, if you look up on the right hand side on the little sticky pad right there, we'll see that after the inspection process in the Binzer, it's important that your mortgage broker has the contact information for the insurance agent. Ideally, during the inspection period is when they are writing up a quote for the mortgage broker. And the reason why that's important is because that way, when you get a, a policy from the insurance agent, they can then forward it to the mortgage broker and then calculate a more accurate mortgage payment. Ideally, if you, for instance, know that you're going to look for a single family home around like 325, for instance, uh, your insurance agent should be able to draw up an estimate of what that would cost. And then in the pre qualification letter, you should have a pretty accurate mortgage payment estimation. Uh, so, what we'll do is you can see the last part of the equation is your insurance. So, if we recall that our mortgage payment is your principal plus your interest plus your mortgage insurance plus your property taxes plus your insurance. Now, mortgage insurance is different from the insurance that we're talking about right now. So, for instance, mortgage insurance is there to protect the bank from default. In the event that you can't make the payment, what happens is then the mortgage insurance kicks on so that the bank can recoup some of their losses. Now, remember, as long as you pay up to once you pay down the mortgage by 20%, the mortgage insurance is going to go away. Now, this insurance that I'm talking about right now is specifically about protecting and insuring the physical asset, the physical property in this case. And right here, was the reason why we call it the last part of the equation is because it's literally the last part where the principal, the interest, the mortgage insurance, property taxes, all those things are very easy to calculate. During the deal is when you're going to get a more finite number for this payment. Now, also, we're going to call this thing the silent part. So, there is a silent part to the policy. And what I mean by this is now, very rarely, especially with the larger insurance companies, that they don't always have a mold addendum. Okay, so for instance, most of the time, it's important to get a policy within like $10,000 to $15,000. That way, in the event that there is mold breakout somewhere in the property, that should be around the price to remediate the issue. Now, obviously, this does vary by state to state. So, for instance, on average, we estimate that $10,000 to $15,000 should cover some mold issues that are going to be detected on the property. This does not include, for instance, the physical rehab after the mold is remediated. So, for instance, that's going to be addition. The insurance is still going to cover that. So, well, if we think about it, for instance, let's say there was an issue where a mold breakout did occur and there was a defective angle valve in the property, which is like something, for instance, the valve that allows the water supply to go into the sink. If that breaks, and then there's flooding in the house, and then you see like mold in the cabinets or on the drywall, the mold remediation will come in and remove all the mold. And then after that mold addendum is used, then from there, the rest of the insurance should be able to cover like replacing the drywall in the cabinets and things like that. So what's frustrating though is that a lot of times you'll get a policy, you won't even realize that you're not covered. So basically, what I'm trying to say is this is the silent part where it's like you need to ask for about the mold addendum, and I'm recommending $10,000 to $15,000 when you do it. Now, if, I call this part the variable also because, for instance, on my property that I had an annual premium of $1,106. That did include the mold remediation, which is why the premium was a little bit higher than normal. But in this case, let's say for instance, you want to get the Bentley of insurance policies, but then let's say if that number then increases your debt to income ratio somewhere close to 49.9, then we realize, okay, you know what? Maybe what we should do, because the most important thing is acquiring the property. Okay, don't stress that you're if you don't have mold addendum for the first couple of years. The highest priority is to put yourself and your family in a better financial position. So acquiring the property is the highest priority. So for instance, if you eliminate the mold addendum and go with a bare minimum policy for the first couple of years, that way that will decrease your debt to income ratio, then I highly recommend that you do that. But at the same time, this is something that is varies from person to person. So if you really feel like, hey, having the highest quality insurance is a really important value to me, then who am I to tell you that, hey, don't get that insurance policy? I'm just telling you more or less like what I recommend and what I personally did, because for me, my highest priority was acquiring the property that is going to allow me to build wealth. And eventually down the road, right, you can build in the mold, because eventually down the road you're going to notice that your rents are going to increase, you're going to make a little bit more money, and then you'll have more than enough debt to income ratio to purchase a mold addendum, which is something you can probably do if you increase one unit, the rent of one unit. Next, this is what my policy was. um, Now I bought my first fourplex, the other fourplex for 225. I had a dwelling limit of 230. I had no coverage on personal property because I just had a laptop and a TV. Basically, I didn't anything else that was stolen. I didn't really care for the most part. Uh, but I did have a personal liability of $300,000. So, and then that's in the event that a tree falls on a tenant's car or something like that. And then the mold coverage, I added a $10,000 limit. Um, let's see. Yeah, oh, yeah, here we go. Yeah, I literally what happened was I literally had a tree fall on a tenant's car, and that was covered. And then also the port also got replaced as well. This is back in like 2015. So those are the good things about having the personal liability. If you can afford more personal liability, great. But I think $300,000 or whatever the value of the asset is, that's sufficient. Should be sufficient. And that's why it's important to get insurance agent that you trust, so you can kind of look around at a policy that best fits you. So that's our section about hiring a insurance